Geeks and geekettes, gats and kittens, hardcore fans and casual looky-loos. It's your old comic book pal Chuck Dixon back to answer questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books for this straight up inside industry dope. You can go no further. You can ask no better than me. Okay, Stephen Phillip Jones. What's the hardest part of writing a comic? A novel? There really are no hard parts about writing a comic for me. It's kind of in my DNA. It's in my genetic makeup. I'm using the wrong part of my brain, to paraphrase Bob Burden. It's just as natural to me as breathing. So yeah, there's no real hard part. I enjoy it all, even when it's tough. It's challenging. It's not hard. It's a problem to be solved, and I enjoy that part of it. I enjoy what I guess would be the hard part for somebody else. As far as the formatting of a comic and everything else, it's a second language to me, so it's not difficult. Now, novels are different, and any novel writer will tell you this. Once you have your beginning and you're off to a good start and you're on a roll and you're writing 4,000 words a day, and then you hit that middle part of the novel, where you got everything set up, you got your characters in motion, you've set up your main situations, and you know where you're going, you know where you want it to end, but now you got that middle portion that you can't skip because that's the story. That's, everything else to this point has been set up. And now you have this long middle part that you got to get through. And for me, that's the hardest part. And talking to other people who write novels, yeah, it's the toughest part. It's the part where you begin to hate the novel. You begin to question your own talents and abilities, and all the rest. But you just have to bear down, get through it, and hope the rewriting gods smile upon you when you go back to do rewrites, to have it all make organic sense. So yeah, it's that tough middle part, and then I always say when I'm over that middle part, you can feel it. You can feel you're over the middle part, okay? And then I always say I'm on a downward slope. It's all downhill from here because I know now I'm into the resolution area of the story. And I've done the hard work of the setup. I've done the hard work of engaging you with the characters and everything else. Now the easy part is bringing it to a conclusion. At least in my case of genre, maybe if you're writing a great American novel, the conclusion isn't as easy. But in my case, I'm writing escapist action fiction for the most part. So I got to write the shootout. Hey, Steve gets a twin spin. What's harder, adapting a movie or book into comics or creating a new story based on a licensed product? You are curious about the process, my friend, and I'll tell you about it. Adaptation work how hard or easy it is depends upon the source material. That's pretty darn obvious. Adapting The Hobbit, not so hard. Obviously challenges because, for this edition of The Hobbit, this graphic novel, we didn't have a lot of real estate. So I had to do a lot of cutting, sticking to the main spine of the story, jettisoning everything that, wasn't absolutely imperative to the story. I had to ditch my favorite character, Bjorn. There simply wasn't any room for a werebear in our version of this. And of course, adapting as I did for Battle of Destiny, the first book of Samuel, awesome source material. Divine, you could say. So again, a challenge, but not difficult, not hard. Now, moving on to something like Wheel of Time, yeah, that was hard because Robert Jordan didn't do me any favors as a comic book writer in writing these novels because they weren't comic book friendly. There were long parts of the book where there really were no visuals, where the characters were static. They were in one place for long periods of time, talking and emoting and relating, but not really doing the kind of things you want to see in a comic book, chases and explosions and people hacking at each other with swords. So that was a difficult one. Now, when it comes to adapting screenplays or movie treatments, I've adapted a few movie treatments into graphic novels. That can be difficult because you're generally dealing not with another writer, but with a producer. It's a producer who wants a graphic novel made of this movie treatment that he's bought or gotten on spec, more likely, and he wants you to turn it into something that he can show to investors or studios or whatever. That's in an easy, digestible form. And comic books are, for some reason, still sexy in Hollywood. So turning your movie treatment into a graphic novel is a usual step. And these are difficult because, one, I got to deal with movie producers, and two, I got to deal with movie producers. And they are, in almost every case, the movie treatment I've been handed, it's a stinker. In 100% of these cases, none of these movies ever got made, and for good reason. And as a writer, I can't help but suggest changes to the treatment to the movie itself, which the producers will not hear of, that a mere comic book writer would dare suggest that any changes made to the original story. So, kind of have to grit my teeth and just do my party trick of turning their treatment into comics. So not very fulfilling, not particularly hard, but not a whole lot of fun. So now, when it comes to licensed material, well, Batman's a license. We don't think of it that way, do we? If you're a comic fan, you think of Batman as a friend. Batman's always been there. He's not a licensed property. He just is. But I wrote Batman for 11 years, and the fun that I had, it wasn't hard. It was easy. Well, not easy. It was still work, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. It was challenging, stimulating. What made it so much fun is I had the faith of the people I was working with. Denny O'Neil and his merry band of associate editors made me feel welcome. Let me know they had faith in me, that I was going to produce good stuff. And that's a secret of anything when you're writing, particularly licensed stuff. The same goes when I wrote The Simpsons. Bill Morrison had faith in me and let me go crazy. Sometimes they had to rein me in a little bit, but for the most part, they just let me go nuts with The Simpsons. Very encouraging and a lot of fun. Same thing with Chris Duffy over at SpongeBob Comics. Chris enjoyed throwing me some curveballs. What if you wrote this? What if you wrote that? And we had a lot of long, deep conversations about who these characters were and how the basically absurd premise of SpongeBob worked. What were the boundary lines? SpongeBob's a very nuanced property. It's crazy and goony and on the surface silly as it is. There's lines you can't cross because it wouldn't be funny anymore. But anyway, again, it was another situation where I had the full faith and trust of the people I was working with, which made it a lot of fun. Again, my pretty long association with G.I. Joe over at IDW, I had the blessings of Larry Hama, who is the man when it comes to G.I. Joe. He told me that I think he suggested me and told me that he liked what I was doing with his pride and joy, his characters, Snake Eyes and Duke and Scarlet and all the rest. And consequently, I had a good time. I think I was mostly left alone because I had Larry's imprimatur, and which I didn't take advantage of. I did a very earnest work on G.I. Joe. I really enjoyed my time there, and I hope it shows. Wait a minute. Steve gets a triple spin. This man's got a lot of questions. He wants to know. He's an inquiring mind. Okay, what's your most favorite and least favorite part of collaborating? We're really into what dislikes and likes. Okay, collaborating. I'm gonna go with writers rather than artists. I've spoken a lot about writing with artists, but you know, my most frequent writing collaborators would be Graham Nolan, Scott Beatty, and Bo Smith. I've co-written with others, Carl Kiesel and a few other guys here and there, Gary Quapis. But these are the guys that I've probably done the most work with. Working with Graham on Batman. Graham played a big part in my Batman work. We did a lot of talking on the phone. Graham is a Batman scholar, and he's a hell of a writer himself, and obviously a storyteller. And we have an easy relationship because we're very blunt with each other, brutally honest. I think that sucks. I don't think we should do it that way. This is the wrong approach. We don't. We're not hiding anything. There's no coyness there. Scott Beatty, who I've worked on with some extraordinarily successful properties, Robin Year One, Batgirl Year One, Nightwing Year One, a number of other things as well. The Last Laugh crossover. Most recently, we co-wrote Unprepped for Antarctic. Actually, it's creator-owned. Antarctic published it. And Scott and I, we're generally on the same page. He has strengths I don't have. I think I have strengths he doesn't have, but we mesh so perfectly, like two gears, that even now when I look over work we've done together, I can't remember who wrote what. And generally we plot together. And that's where Graham is strongest. No, I mean, he's not strongest. He's got a lot of strengths. But with Graham, generally when I co-wrote with Graham, it was the plot. It wasn't the page by page. With Scott, we would collaborate on plot and then go scene by scene. And we worked organically. Maybe he would open the book, and then I would write the following scene, and then leave him to write the next, until we got to the end of the book. So it was a more organic thing, and then we would each do a write through. And catch. Generally, Scott caught things that I didn't catch, or had. He always has another way of saying things to improve the dialogue. So yeah, that's why I really enjoy working with him. Plus, he's a super nice guy. Now with Bo, Bo pretty much was my first writing collaborator. He asked me if I wanted to come in with him on this Black Terror miniseries, and since then we've co-written a number of things together. But he brought me in, and I didn't know how to co-write with somebody else, neither did he. And this is where we kind of invented the organic style that Scott Beatty and I would use later, where we co-plotted it together, and then he and I would write each other into corners and dare the other to get out of them. And it's a strange chemistry. I often say to Bo, we're like the killers in Cold Blood. Truman Capote said that he wrote that separately these guys were harmless, but together they were a dangerous pair. Together they made one homicidal maniac, and it's kind of the way things work with Bo and I. We write these really dark, bleak, ugly stories, even though we didn't mean to at the beginning. And even our Wildcat crossovers with Batman and Catwoman and DC, we strained the bounds of the comics code on both of those. If you read them, you'll see they're extraordinarily violent, more violent than I generally write things. And for some reason that Bo and I working together brings that out in each other. Thankfully, we live several states apart, so the public is safe. Matt Webster, what is a comic book that you read that has left an impression on you all of these years? Whether it was a lesson learned or just a really awesome moment when you think back on great comics you've read, what comes to your mind? Well, the best thing here is a Jeopardy answer, isn't it? You're asking me what's the first thing that came to my mind. I've read thousands and thousands and thousands of comics, and a lot of them have had different, made different impressions on me, sometimes subconsciously. But the one I remember that was a true catharsis was an issue of the New Gods. And people say Kirby wasn't a good writer. I say thee nay. Kirby was a good writer. Yeah, his dialogue was wonky and, let's say, idiosyncratic, but boy, he knew his story points. He knew boom. Like, and the scene that got me was a scene in a story called Deep Six, the Deep Six, and Orion of the New Gods is up against a bunch of parademons, and he's Orion, so he kicks all of their asses, takes them out. But that's not enough. He catches up with a parademon named Slig, and he decides that it's not enough to just kick Slig's ass. He's going to kill Slig's mother box. Now, all of the Apocalypse and New Genesis characters had the mother box, which was this device that gave them all their answers. It was a personal device that knew everything, guided them, saw them through life. It was there when they needed a friend. It was there when they needed answers. And I always thought the mother box was probably the most preposterous idea that Kirby had ever created. And now today we all have mother boxes. We're all walking around with them. They even look like the mother boxes that Kirby talked about. Ours are actually even smaller than the mother boxes that appear in the New Gods and Forever People and Mr. Miracle. So here Orion is torturing Slig. Now, up to this point in the book, Orion was the hero. He was the steadfast, stalwart, soldier type hero. And here it's revealed that no, he's really creepy. He destroys Slig's mother box and then laughs about it. Look at it. She's gone, Slig. When she couldn't serve you, your mother box chose to die. She loved you, Slig. And he's laughing at you. It's like your mom just died. Ha, ha, ha. And this impacted me because, Kirby sets this guy up, and he's the main hero. He's the big hero. He's the big badass in his new universe at DC. And then we find out he's a psychotic creep. And we knew he was Darkseid's son, but we didn't know how much of a son. We didn't know that the acorn had not fallen very far from the tree. And through this, we learned that Orion's own mother box helps to modify his behavior so that he doesn't become the monster that his father is. And, say what you will about Kirby's writing, this is a very powerful scene, and it's very nuanced. And it had a big impression on me. It made me think about these characters, the superhero genre, and everything else in a deeper way. And I was just a young spud, just a fanboy, with no idea that I would work in the business someday. But this issue and this story, and particularly this scene, made a big impression on me. Lori Calcaterra. What do you look for in a comic book for personal reading? I like good art, like everybody else, but mostly I look for a balance between the artwork and the writing. I prefer comics that are visually told, that are cinematically told. I prefer comics that are, prime examples of the comic book medium, so that's what I look for in a comic book. I don't see a whole lot of that anymore. And generally, I don't read a lot of superhero stuff because, as Darwin Cook once said, I'm a grown man. Childhood wish fulfillment figures, although I love writing them, don't appeal to me so much for entertainment value, unless it's in the hands of, somebody a really terrific writer and artist team that's wringing some other thing out of it. But generally, I prefer comics that are visually driven, taking full advantage of the comic book medium. Comics that I can look at and possibly learn something from, as opposed to just reading a story. But, good art, good story, generally what all of you are looking for, right? I mean, I'm no different. Um, and eye candy. I want the stuff to be attractive. I want it to be stuff I want to look at. I don't really want to look at ugly comics, no matter how well drawn they are. So, Henry Joseph Feeks. If you were handed the rights to any classic action movies that had to be adapted into comics, which ones would you want to do? Well, there's only one I'd really love to do, and that's The Dirty Dozen. I'd love to do a comic based on the movie. Even more so, I'd love to do a comic based on the original novel by E.M. Nathanson. Because it's, as much as I love The Dirty Dozen as an action film, as a war film, as a boy's own adventure, crazy gonzo, shoot 'em up. The novel has all of that, but it has a lot of deep character studies. So we really get into the heads and the lives and the pasts and motivations of quite a few of the characters in the story. What makes them tick? There's a lot of suspense aspects in the book that don't really appear in the movie. I've done other videos about it. As much as I love this movie, I have a little trouble with the third act. I would love to do an adaptation where I fix those problems. It's not major changes, doesn't really change the film at all. It just elements that would heighten the suspense in the third act beyond what already exists in the movie. The movie obviously has a very suspenseful third act, with all the killing and shooting and will they survive aspects. But there's this one missed opportunity that I would probably fix in an adaptation. So if anybody's out there who owns the rights to Dirty Dozen is listening and you want a Dirty Dozen graphic novel, you know where to find me. Neil Matthews. So do you know, please, if Sly Stallone is going to do anything else with the Cobra franchise, and are you involved? No, I'm not involved in any Cobra reboots or anything else. I haven't spoken to Sly, and he insists I call him Sly. I'd be Mr. Stallone to this day if he'd let me. So he's we haven't really talked about Cobra, but if I were to propose a Cobra graphic novel, I'm sure he'd say yes. If I wanted to go there, I'd have to think about it. But I'm busy right now with Rambo stuff. We're going to do a series of Rambo graphic novels, and the first one is coming out. It's the artwork is completed. It'll be released in April. You can still buy it in demand from Indiegogo. This is a graphic novel featuring John Rambo in his first tour in Vietnam. You get to see his origin story. It goes from a teenager in Arizona to the killing machine that he would become in the jungles of Southeast Asia. It's got fantastic artwork, as you can see here, still available in demand. Dennis Ray asks, any more work for Zenith Scope or Antarctic in the future? Well, as I said, I did, Scott Beatty and I did Unprepped with Marlon Shoup. It was published by Antarctic recently. And then I guess about a year ago, Ben Dunn and I created a graphic novel, a concept that I don't know. I mean, he's working on it. It was like an 80-page script. And I haven't seen any art from it recently, but I'm sure Ben's working on it. And I don't want to say anything about it, but it is work that I have done for Antarctic. I continue to have an excellent relationship with Ben and Joe. I've known them almost as long as I've been in the comic book business. And they produce good stuff. You should check out Antarctic if you never have. These are guys, these are comic book guys through and through. They, Alpha to Omega, these guys are pure comics. And that's what I dig about working with them. Now over at Zenith Scope, now I haven't done any work for Zenith Scope in a while, although, I've done quite a bit in the past on their titles like Robin Hood and Van Helsing. And I dug it. I enjoyed working for them. They were good guys. Had a lot of fun. But I got busy with other projects, mostly creator-owned stuff. And so, I had to say no the last few times they came calling, sadly. But the door's open. They said if you ever want to come back and do anything with us, we'd love We'd love to have you. So, but it was good. It was, fun stuff, good girl art, horror stuff, meat and potatoes, escapist fantasy stories, which, we need more of. Joseph figured, which comic book character presented the biggest challenge for you to write and why? Well, he really wasn't a comic book character, but Ralph Wiggum is so hard to write. First of all, when you write The Simpsons, it's got to be funny. So that's a burden. It's got to be funny. Really funny, not just jokey joke. You got to build on character and come up with funny storylines and make them progressively funny and references and blah 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 blah. There's a lot of moving parts in a comedy, and even more so in The Simpsons. And I just found Ralph Wiggum very difficult to write, to the point where I avoided him as much as possible, because I could pretty much figure out funny things for Homer and Bart and Marge and Lisa to say, and all the other characters. But Ralph Wiggum speaks in these insane non sequiturs that just come out of nowhere, don't often relate to anything going on. And the thing about Ralph Wiggum is that everything he says is meant to be funny. Everything is funny. Ralph Wiggum doesn't have any setup or development dialogue. He's always the punchline. And so you got to come up with some bizarre thing that only Ralph Wiggum would say. And that was difficult. I wonder if the Simpsons writers, the original, Mike Rice and Al Jean, knew someone like Ralph Wiggum and were simply quoting someone they knew, because that stuff is out there. Now, as far as comic book characters, difficult to write, the Riddler. Now, I love the Riddler. It's my favorite Batman villain by far, but he's really difficult to write and write well, because he's got this template. He's got this weird gimmick with the riddles, and the riddles have to, in my mind, in a classic Riddler story, the riddles have to lead Batman and Robin away from the crime and to the crime simultaneously, depending on which answer Batman or Robin divine from the riddle. And so I set the bar high for myself. I was challenging myself. I'm sure I could have phoned in a Riddler story and everybody would have been perfectly happy, but I couldn't do that to my man, Eddie Nigma, because I love this character. And so, I've only written him a couple of times. In the 11 years I wrote Batman, I only wrote two Riddler stories. And then every once in a while I would have him show up in a story, in a cameo, because I couldn't resist, because I like him so much. But he's a tough character to write. And so I didn't avoid him. I just only wrote him when I really came up with a story I thought was worthy of the character. Hey, if you got suggestions, questions, pictures of the doggies and kitties, whatever, the best place to, or if you own the rights to the Dirty Dozen, the best place to reach me is brunobookstore@gmail.com. Bruno Bookstore at gmail.com. It's the most direct line to me, and it's the best way to reach me. I check that site, I check that address a number of times a day, although most of the questions today came from Facebook. Thank you, Facebook folks, Facebook friends, for answering the call for questions. And while I got you, if you want to subscribe, you can go over to subscribestar.com / Chuck Dixon, and sign up. I have two different tiers. I have a $5 tier and a $1 tier. The $5 tier, well, both tiers get you digital goodies. You'll get all kinds of stuff sent to your email. But the $5 tier gets you an initial package of signed comic books, specialty items, things like that. Things hopefully worth far more than $5. And also, you'll get this one-of-a-kind, subscriber-only minifigure, gaming, role-play gaming figure of me, Chuck Dixon. So if you go over to Subscribestar, join the $5 tier, this little guy could be yours. So that's it for me this week. I I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing, liking. Thank you for spreading the word. Thank you for all of your kind words and questions and all the rest. And I will see, hopefully, every single one of you down the road.